Hey guys, welcome back to the Opel GT build from AMG and 125th Scale. Just gonna bring you up to date on where our progress is with this kit. So let's get started. Alright, let's take a look at a few more of the added details and the finished engine compartment. Or not engine compartment, but the finished engine installed in the car. Last we left off, I was just starting to install the engine and other components into the engine compartment. Just test fitting the glass and test fitting the interior, so let's get that out of the way. And let's take a look at what we got going on here with the engine. As you can see, the complete 4-cylinder has been installed into the chassis, including the intake, the air intake is in, the radiator hose is in. You can see the ignition module is in. Now there were a few instances where the car's instructions are incorrect as to where some of the details go in this vehicle. Let's take a look and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Just move things over a little bit. I'll make a little room here so I can show you guys where the instructions are wrong. Now if we look at the instructions for the engine compartment, this is the brake fluid reservoir. Shows it in the engine bay itself, which is incorrect for this car, as in the real car the brake booster was mounted on the outside of the firewall toward the front of the car. A little bit of an unusual arrangement, but that's where it is in the real car. Also, there's a battery that's located here ahead of the radiator in the nose of the car. And what I've recently learned is that the battery can be located in two positions. One is sideways here, with the side facing the front of the car, or if it had air conditioning, it's in the middle of the engine compartment, just ahead of the radiator, in the nose of the car. I'll show you what I'm talking about as we go through the paces here with the model. Now, here, as you can see, let me just remove the battery. We'll get to that in a minute. I have located the brake master cylinder in the same spot as it would be in the real car. The instructions want it here, inside by the engine, whereas on the real car it is here, ahead of the firewall. Now this master cylinder is a much more detailed unit. This is actually from I'm trying to remember what kit I got this from. This may have been from the Knight Rider Pontiac Firebird, where I did a custom build on that and I didn't use this reservoir, so I figured I'd use it here as it's much more detailed and better appearing than the original master cylinder that came with the kit. So that's mounted here, right next to where you can see the steel mesh that I installed here for the radiator to give the appearance more of a realistic appearance to the radiator fins. And that's where we are with the master cylinder. Now, you'll also notice here we have a real aluminum radiator cap. That is sourced from the model car garage and looks a whole lot better than the molded in plastic cap they had on the kit. Now what I did was I cut off the molded in cap on the radiator, drilled a small hole, and just inserted the aluminum cap into the radiator via a small peg underneath the cap. think it looks a lot better than the original piece that was in there. Now, another place where the kit itself is wrong is in placement of the ignition coil. The kit itself will tell you to place the ignition coil here on the side of the block when you're assembling the engine. That is incorrect, as from every reference photo I've seen, the coil is located either here or here on the wheel well beside the engine. So this is the correct placement for the coil. Now, the kit provided coil is not bad, so I just use that instead of making one of my own. But definitely the location of it in the instructions is wrong. Now, one thing you're going to have to look out for when you're putting this together is
sick of red, itchy mosquito
installing
bites? This genius college student just solved a 210 million-year-old bug
intake
with a device that eradicates
and the radiator
mosquitoes from
hose.
any environment.
As when you install the radiator hose, it's glued into the side of the block here and into the radiator. You're going to have to make sure that the firewall is in the proper position, as it can move around on you, so that the radiator hose actually reaches it and pegs into the small hole in the radiator here. Now, installing the intake, you got to make sure you line it up with the small hole that's in the firewall,
as a student with a perfect SAT score,
exits here,
engineered mosquito killing devices,
and then have it sit right on top of the carburetor, and you are all set as far as that goes.
Emitting a broad spectrum
so those
of light
are
in the hope it attracts them. But Oscar pinpointed the exact
some of the modifications. Here you can see the bottom
like
of the engine as it's
and build a
all in there.
device that kills them in their droves.
You can see all of the detail painting done to the engine. Quite a bit of it still stands out.
Over 99% of mosquitoes in its vicinity
Now, one thing that did bother me was the fact that this car had no battery. And once you assemble it and you open the hood, you can actually see this area here.
And called it the most significant discovery to come from their university.
So when you look inside, you'll see that there's nothing there when there should be, as I said, the brake master cylinder and the battery. So what I did was, this kit from Model Car Garage, which is a fantastic little representation, using what appears to be a resin cast battery and photo etched battery tray and hold downs, along with terminals and wire. This is a fantastic little kit from Model Car Garage that allows you to build an entire battery tray with battery and terminals. Not the easiest thing to put together due to the small size, and it did give me a devil of a time getting it all together, but it does look fantastic when it's all done. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it, due to the size of the battery being a bit larger,
I had zero idea so many
I'm going to place it in the position of the battery as it would be in the air-conditioned car, or as I've also learned, when the original battery tray rots out in these cars, many of the owners just take the battery and install it in the same position as the air-conditioned car, which is going to be right here. The ground wire going that way, power wire going that way. We'll route that as we're ready to put everything together. So that now, when you do open the hood, you'll be able to see the battery and the master cylinder,
and I got to confess
which
last Friday I went out
makes for a great little display. And this battery kit from Model Car Garage, I definitely recommend it, as this is the part number for the kit. Here you can see this is the another item of theirs, which is the steel mesh grill. But here you can see the photo etch sheet that all the parts came on, along with the resin battery and the wiring, all comes together as one complete kit. The MCG 2192. I'll try and leave a link in the description to the Model Car Garage I can't say enough about how much I like it. It is very difficult to put together. As you can see, mine didn't come out 100% perfect, but does look really nice. Alright, let's take a look at what else we've got going on. Since I had to wait an extended amount of time for the front bumper, which I chromed, and as I showed you in my previous video, this is the bumper here. It is done with the Molotov chrome pen, which requires an extended amount of time to cure and dry properly so that we don't damage it as we're touching it. I decided that I was going to put together the Buick V6 that came with the kit as the optional engine, as that's going to be displayed as part of the Starfleet Motors tip-top shop, which was one of my other builds of a repair bay garage shop area. And this is going to be one of the engines that the guys are working on. Now, I didn't do too much in the way of modifications other than the paint application, which the motor, first thing I'm going to tell you is that it's not very well detailed, and having it look good is going to come 100% down to your paint application. As you can see, painted the engine block blue, the transmission is weathered and painted. I've gone into exactly how I do that in some of my other videos, and I think also in this one, in this series. What I did do as far as modifying is I added fuel lines going to the carburetor, just for another little added to realism, going down to the fuel pump. The one thing I have to tell you is that the fit of these parts is mediocre at best. You're going to find that the exhaust manifolds will not match the exhaust ports in the engine block. Now, the manifold comes in two parts, which is the flange here and the actual manifold assembly. Luckily, the flange will cover the ports, and then you can just glue the flange and then glue the manifold assembly to the block, and it covers up all the ports that don't match, and actually winds up looking pretty good. Had the same problem on both sides. Now the engine is painted in Tamiya blue, then using a mixture of Tamiya titanium silver, titanium gold, all clad, I think it was all clad, some sort of a bronze color. I forget exactly what the name of the color was. And Tamiya panel line paint, and then a little bit of Chevy engine orange for the filter. And I'm not really sure of all the details on this engine, as I'm not that familiar with this engine, but I painted it up the best I could and tried to make it as realistic as I could. And I think it actually, for being a piece with not very well defined details that is, as I said, mediocre at best, it does go together very nicely and makes a very nice showpiece. If you're willing to pull in the work, it required quite a bit of shaving down and modifying to make everything fit correctly. The only thing left to put on is the air cleaner, and I was going to wire this engine. Haven't decided on whether I will or not as far as spark plug wires go. I did paint the terminals on the distributor cap, as this engine is going to be in the repair shop out of a car, and something that's either being dismantled or being put together, and just may not have the spark plug wires in it yet. So there we go. That is our optional Buick V6. If you're thinking of, if you have this kit, if you can find one, and you're thinking of doing the larger engine, this is pretty much what you'll get and what it'll look like. As I said, not the best molded engine I've ever seen, but when painted and put together, it actually makes a really nice display piece. I do like it much more than I thought I would. Okay, let's go on to our next item. Okay, next I'm going to talk about is the prep work on the body. Right now I'm in the process of wet sanding to smooth out the paint. Trying to get the Tamiya paint, I have to say, is my favorite brand of paint. It lays incredibly smoothly and looks fantastic, even without any sort of prep work afterwards. But being one who's never satisfied with just good enough, I'm going over it again. What I'm doing is I'm wet sanding the entire body. I've been asked a lot on my posts how exactly I do this to polish my cars out. So I'm gonna go over the whole thing with you right now as I'm here. As you can see, I've already done the roof, and you can see the reflective quality in it. It's almost mirror-like. Still needs a little more work, but this is not going to be the final product, as after all the work I put in, it's going to get a clear coat, and then all the polishing starts all over again. This is just to make the paint as smooth and shiny as possible before adding the clear. It's a step that's not really necessary, but in my opinion, I think it really enhances the paint and the reflective quality of the paint as you're getting the car finished up and polishing it all out. The reflective quality, I think, is enhanced 100% by the extra step of polishing before clear coating. Now, generally what I like to do, it's going to be very simple, is you can see how shiny the paint is here. Now, what I do is, this is the quality of the shine during right out of the can. Not bad, but really could use a lot of evening out. What I do is I wet sand with 3000 grit, and the wet sanding is mostly just to even out the paint with 3000. You're not going to be doing much polishing with 3000. This is basically just to even out the paint. Get rid of the high spots, even it out. Now, when you're got the paint where you want it, what you're going to see is a very even, dull shine on the car. If you see any really shiny, bright spots, that means that you have to go over and do a little more sanding on it. But for the most part, it should be a very even, dull shine. Pretty much what I've got here. What you want to do is stay away from edges, as if you burn through the paint, you're going to have a bit of repainting to do. So you're going to have to go in and check your progress regularly as you're working to make sure that you're not damaging the edges of the doors or wheel wells, the hood opening. And those areas you're going to want to leave alone so that you don't risk burning through the paint. Now, as you can see here, you can see how dull the paint is here. Took all the shine out of it here. And now we're going to work on the front fender. Okay, what I do is I take my Tamiya sanding sponge, 3000 grit, and all I'm really going to do is I'm just going to run the sanding sponge lightly over the paint. You don't have to put a lot of pressure on, as all you're looking to do is just to even out the paint, just to knock it down a little bit. Just nice, smooth, even strokes. Making sure you cover every area that you can so that you won't have any uneven spots. Once you put the clear coat down, it's really going to give a nice even shine to everything, but it will lay smoother if it's got a nice smooth base to work with. As I said, keep an eye on it, what you're doing. Make sure that you're not going through the paint. Stay away from your edges. What I like to do is I cut the sanding sponges into smaller shapes that will help avoid the edges. So I do a little bit of sanding, and then I wipe it all down. I want to see if there are any, where we are as far as any shiny spots that are left. See if there are any highs or lows, and that will. And you'll find that if you buff it out a little bit, you will get a bit of a dull shine back on the body. And if you look at and you can actually see the reflection start to come back, as just with buffing it out after sanding, you're starting to actually repolish the paint. As I said, this is not really necessary when you're building one of these models, as the paint itself lays very nicely, and if you just clear coated it and then work on the clear coat, it would save you a lot of work. But this is just something that I like to do, because I like to try and get my finishes as smooth as I can. Not quite at the airbrushing level yet of doing the bodies. I'm still learning airbrushing. And not quite at the point where I can lay a super smooth airbrushed paint job on a body. But I'm learning, and eventually I'll get there. But for now, I don't mind putting in a little bit of extra effort here. Well, actually a lot of extra effort, as this takes quite a bit of time. Because once this is done and all the polishing is done, it's going to require clear coating, and then that will leave another. Then it'll have to sit for another 3 days until all of the clear is cured before I can do any more work with it. So as you can see, here we're taking. Let's see how we're doing. Yeah, that's coming out nice and smooth now. Now you're going to repeat this process. This is a 3000 grit sanding sponge. You're going to repeat this process with 3000, 4000, 6000, 8000, all the way up to 12,000. At least this is what I do. And then after that, it's going to require polishing with Tamiya polishing compounds. I use the fine and finish. As I go over it with the fine about 2 or 3 times, and then I go into it with the finish, and that's where you end up with this. Now when it gets to this point, then it's ready for paint. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue the wet sanding with the other grits. Don't want to bore you to death with that. And we'll be back with a little more progress once we get a little more of the sanding done. Alright, so we'll be back soon. Alright guys, here we have the body. I've just finished wet sanding. Hold on, let me just pause this for a second here. Just finished wet sanding it from 8 to 12,000 grit. from 4 to 12,000 grit. And as you can see, some of the shine is actually starting to come back. And that is just because the paint is so smooth now. And even that continued sanding to the 12 grit is doing more polishing than it is actually sanding. So while it still needs quite a bit of work to get to the quality that the roof is, this is pretty much as far as I'm going to go with the sanding. And now it's time to turn it to polishing. Now, if you want to know when you've sanded enough, I like to think of it as when the model looks like it came molded in this color as opposed to it being painted. That means you've got the paint pretty much as smooth as the bare plastic, which means you've eliminated basically all of the orange peel. And that is pretty much where you want it to be. Now, what I like to do when I do the 12K is that instead of having the sanding pad completely soaked, I just very lightly wet it so that it actually serves as more of a buffing pad than it does a sanding pad. And that allows you really to smooth the paint out. At least that's what works for me. And bring it to life. So now we're going to do a little bit of polishing and see how much we get this come back. Alright, I'm just going to give you a little sample of the polishing. I'm going to do it on the rear deck here. I'm going to start with the Tamiya fine compound. And I use a Tamiya applicator. And what I like to do, I just put a couple of dots of the compound on the model. I really like this Tamiya stuff. It's the best stuff that I have ever used, apart from automotive grade polishing compounds. And now I'm just going to, let's just clean off some of the dried compound that's on there. There we go. Now basically we're just gonna rub it into the paint in circular motions. We're gonna do one small section at a time. That way we make sure we don't miss any spots. We cover everything. And as you're rubbing it into the paint, you'll start to see the shine come back to the paint. Now you may have to go apply it more than once, depending on how much you get out of it on the first shot. As you can see, that's coming out here. Now what I'm going to do is, I bought the Tamiya compound applicators, which are 3 colored rags, each one colored for the compound that they want you to use on it. And just gonna buff out this rear deck. As you can see, the shine's starting to come back. I rotate the applicator so that we can go at it with a little bit of a clean material, and that helps us to continue to keep buffing and removing and the compound material. As I said, depending on how much you buff it, and your shine just keeps getting better and better. See, that's one application. We're going to try one more time here. Sometimes you'll get scratches, in which case then, if I have a really tough one, I'll use this Really helps to get the scratches out. And then sometimes when I get one that's a really tough paint job, I'll use this, which is a little harsher than the Tamiya compound. I'm not going to need that in this case, as the paint here is really working out very well. Now, again, you want to make sure that you're not going through the paint. So always keeping an eye that the paint's not getting too thin, because even as you're applying this, you're removing paint, as you can see on the applicator. The green is the paint on the applicator, is the paint coming off the car. So there's only a certain amount of times you actually want to do this before you apply the clear coat. So there we go. Now we're going to buff. You don't really have to put a ton of effort into it, as the compound does all of the work. And as you can see, by the reflections in it, the paint is really coming back nicely. And the more you buff and rub, the shinier it gets. Just continue to buff that out. And as you can see, that paint is coming right back to life. Let's see if we can catch the reflection of the light in there. There we go. So that's getting almost where I want it. Gonna try one more light application of the fine compound. And then we're going to go to the finishing compound. Now, seeing as how I have yet to apply my clear coat, you're going to have to make sure that after you're done with this, you go in and you clean all of the compound material off of the body. Okay. Here we go. We're gonna now clean and buff. To the clean part of the rag. Some people use an old t-shirt, which works just as well as these rags. Or these applicators, let's not call them rags. I got these because I really wanted to try them and see how well they worked out, and I am very happy with them. It's well worth the price. And here we go, that is looking good. There we go. That's a nice shine coming back right there. So now that's step one. And step two, now we're going to apply the polishing compound. I went a little heavy there, didn't mean to put that much on. And for that we use the second rag in the kit. I can't find the third one, so I only have two now. I'm going to have to order another set from Tamiya. And now we're going to go in here. Now, This polishing compound is, I don't know if it's made from magical unicorn juice or what, because this stuff is amazing. It really, really finishes up the polishing like I've never seen before. I would recommend this to everyone and anyone who really wants to bring the shine out on their cars. I don't know what Tamiya puts in it, but it does a job like I've never seen before. There we go. And then you just keep buffing and buffing and buffing, and the more you buff, the more the shine comes out. Matter of fact, this stuff works so well that on my last build, which was the 1985 Pontiac Fiero, I didn't even bother with the clear coat because the shine that came out after polishing was so good, I just didn't see the need to bother with clearing it. Well, the only issue with that is that you don't have any protection for the paint. So as you're working with the car, you're handling the paint as opposed to dealing with a hard shell that the clear coat will provide to help protect the paint. So that's the trade-off. But the Fiero looks so good that I just thought I would save myself a step and not bother with the clear. And there we go, guys. You can see the reflection of the light. Let me see that. That is where I'm going with this. Now, mind you, this is yet to be clear coated. This is all just paint. But the shine on it is amazing. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the body. I'm not going to bore you with watching me here, sitting here watching me polish. So I'm going to end this video here. And when next we meet, the body will be completely polished out and cleared. And we'll be ready for final assembly. Alright then, I'm going to see you on the next one. And remember to like and subscribe. Join me on my Facebook page, Onyx Models. And give me a thumbs up while you're there. Or here. And we're going to keep going and keep building. Alright, I'll see you on the next one.